Everyone knows what a giraffe is, but what little we know about them was first gathered decades ago by an intrepid Canadian scientist.
I'd never heard of anyone actually doing this, but it never occurred to me, how would you know what a giraffe did unless you went and watched?
We still don't seem to know that much about these amazing animals.
Giraffes are absolutely incredible creatures. They're about as likely as a unicorn.
If you went to another planet and you tried to describe a giraffe, it would just sound like the most absurd creature you could ever imagine.
But these beloved icons of the wild are disappearing fast, and the race is on to save them.
Really fascinating.
Can new technologies help to save these forgotten giants? It's safe to assume that almost every human being on the planet knows this iconic animal. Giraffes have walked the earth for at least 1 million years. Although they've fascinated us for centuries, we knew almost nothing about the animal until the groundbreaking fieldwork done by biologist Dr. Ann Innes-Dagg.
I always wanted to go and study giraffe, so it was really a lifetime ambition.
The passionate young scientist wanted to do something unique, to study giraffes in the wild. But in the 1950s, being a woman with such ambitions was challenging. Even though she managed to get to South Africa, she still faced discrimination.
It was awful, really. They just really didn't want to have a woman. I said, well, maybe I could stay at the hospital, or maybe there's a clinic nearby. And I was just desperate because I'd come all this way and I was spending my own money and I didn't have that much.
Finally, a local farmer took a chance and billeted the young researcher.
It was just like magical. You sort of never thought that would happen, and there you were. I'd never heard of anyone actually doing this, but it never occurred to me, how would you know what a giraffe did unless you went and watched? So that's what I did. Later on, I found that actually I was the very first person to go to Africa and do this, just to go there just to study an animal's behavior.
The data Anne collected in South Africa became her book, the foundation upon which giraffe scientists have built their studies ever since. The sun rises over Samburu National Reserve in northern Kenya, watched by the next generation of researchers. It's home to one of the last groups of giraffe. John Doherty, from Queen's University, Belfast, has dedicated his life to studying and conserving these animals. His journey began with Anne's book.
I've known Ann Dagg through her books since 2004. When I was doing my master's, the book was under my arm wherever I went, and I read it cover to cover. Anne is the Jane Goodall of giraffe research. She was the pioneer.
Is that the boundary?
John's research partner is Jacob Liaidra, a Samburu elder whose people have lived here for generations.
I'm a giraffe project naturalist, and we work with John, helping me for the research of the giraffe here. When I was a schoolboy, you see a lot of giraffes. You can tell now the difference because that number, there's no more giraffes.
The long dry season is about to end in Samburu, where John and Jacob are based. This 165 square kilometer protected area is relatively free of poaching and human encroachment. Here, there are all the animals you would expect to see, including giraffe predators. Because of the dangers, John and Jacob do much of their daily work of observing giraffes from the safety of their vehicle. Across the continent, there are 9 subspecies. These are reticulated giraffes.
Quite a few juveniles there, eh?
Yes, this is the breeding ground.
I make that group 5.
Yeah, there are 5, yeah.
Most populations of giraffes look like pale animals with dark spots. But the reticulated giraffe looks like a dark animal broken up by a network of white lines. So it's not pale animal with dark spots, it's dark animal in a string vest, if you see what I mean. And that network of white lines is called a reticulation. That's what the word means. Rete is the Latin for net. So reticulated giraffe means netted giraffe.
Distinguishing between individual giraffes, though, can be a tricky business.
For our scientific research, we've learned to identify hundreds of individual giraffes on site.
The giraffe under the rainbow is hedgehog.
Never seen it for a long time.
No, I thought of him this morning because there was one we saw this morning that was similar to him, and I was trying to make it into hedgehog, and then lo and behold, there he is. Hedgehog.
John and Jacob give the giraffes local Samburu names, as well as nicknames, to help identify the animals. The nicknames are associated with unique features on their coats. This is Malcolm X.
Of course, it's important to know both sides of the animal because you can get into all sorts of trouble otherwise. I remember, for example, there were 2 adult females. One of them was called Gone Fishing and the other one was called Ice Cream. And in every group where we found Gone Fishing, Ice Cream was also there. And we thought those 2 guys are good friends. And then, of course, one day, Gone Fishing turned around and she was Ice Cream. We'd given 2 different names to 2 sides of the same giraffe.
In getting to know so many giraffes so intimately, John and Jacob have built up a valuable scientific resource.
One problem is that all of that information is in my head and Jacob's head, and if we're squashed by an elephant tomorrow, then everything is lost. So we've helped to develop a computerized pattern recognition system, and we're using the system to digitize all of the information that's in our heads.
By identifying giraffes, John and Jacob can understand their movements and social behavior, which helps the researchers take action against the drastic decline in reticulated giraffe numbers.
It's very important because within the last decade and a half, the population has declined by more than 80%.
John and Jacob are part of a new wave of scientists who are turning their attention to giraffes, which until recently were relatively unstudied animals compared to other large African mammals such as elephants or lions.
Giraffes have a complex physiology. They're very unusual, vertically elongated animals, and that brings with it challenges in terms of how their body functions.
Giraffes use their long necks to feed well above other animals, where they can secure the richest leaves.
Giraffes are absolutely huge. An adult male can be 1.5 tons. And so their absolute need for bulk food is high, and that means that they have to eat pretty much round the clock. Where an elephant would tear the branch off and just shove it all in, thorns and all, the giraffe leaves everything intact. Just the flowers have been picked from between the thorns. And I think their whole physiology adapts them to that. The long tapering neck, the long tapering head, long mobile prehensile lips, and then 18 inches of prehensile tongue beyond that. They're browsers. Grazers eat grass, browsers eat bushes and trees. And the trees are not very happy about that. The horrible thing about being a plant is you're rooted to the spot. You see the giraffe coming, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. So they've developed all kinds of defense mechanisms to discourage the giraffes.
Some trees fight back against giraffes by hosting aggressive, stinging ants who live in their hollow branches. When a giraffe feeds on the tree, the ants attack.
Giraffes are ruminants, so they're dividing their time between feeding and chewing the cud, and reprocessing the food that they've eaten earlier. And that enables them to extract the maximum benefit from it.
We have one stomach, but giraffes have 4, like a cow. The first stomach, the large rumen, is where leaves build up as the giraffe feeds. This stomach mixes the leaves with gastric juices, and they are turned into boluses, which the giraffe will send back up its digestive tract when it takes a break from eating. It will then chew this cud before it is swallowed again. By digesting twice and fermenting food in all 4 stomachs, giraffes are efficient eating machines. Like feeding, drinking presents challenges. A giraffe's neck helps it get down low enough to drink. But how does it avoid passing out when snapping its head back up 4 meters? By having a special regulating feature located at the base of its skull called the rete mirabile.
The rete mirabile, the miraculous net, is a complex sponge of very fine capillaries in the base of the brain that acts so that when a giraffe lowers its head to drink, the blood rushes down towards the brain, but then it meets this sponge, this network of tiny capillaries, and has to go all the way through them before it can change the blood pressure in the brain. Conversely, when the giraffe lifts its head up so quickly, the blood can't drain from the brain too quickly because, again, it's got to go through all that complex network of capillaries.
A giraffe's neck is not just about reaching for food and water. Male giraffes put their necks to a special use.
That's close enough, that giraffe.
Maybe here would be a good place to stop.
They're the smallest giraffes I've ever seen fighting.
Oh, yes.
Giraffes are just like any other mammals, and the males can be pretty aggressive. Almost all of the fighting takes place when they're adolescent. They're thought to be kind of rather ineffectual fighters because they engage in this necking behavior that sometimes people mistake. In fact, when I first saw it, I thought it was some kind of courtship behavior, and that's a common mistake. They're sparring to establish some kind of hierarchy of dominance. Once that's been sorted out, there's very little need for real fighting. But once or twice, you see big adult breeding bulls fighting one another. The worst fight that I ever saw, I heard it from hundreds of meters away. I could hear the sort of bone-splintering thuds and went to see what was going on, and there was blood spraying from open wounds. It was like watching 2 tyrannosaurs fighting. It was a primeval battle between 2 giants. It was astonishing to watch. But it's something that, as I say, very rarely happens because sensibly giraffes sort it out at an earlier stage in their lives.
From their lofty position above the savanna, the giraffes can see any approaching threat, like a lion, or sometimes a human being.
Okay.
There's a man walking down there. On Samburu.
Yes, I see the guy. Walking fast.
Yeah.
They really fear people, don't they?
Yeah.
We all know the stately walk of the giraffe, but when threatened, giraffes can run at speeds up to 56 kilometers per hour, which they can sustain for 2 kilometers.
Giraffes have to be able to move fast, especially when they're under threat. They need to be able to outrun the predators, and although they appear to be running in slow motion, they can do that. They're fast enough to escape from a lion. Of course, if they're caught by surprise, then that's when lions take them. But yeah, they can cover the ground.
A giraffe does something interesting to prevent tripping over its long legs, bunching them up under itself once during each galloping stride. The giraffe then sets them down in rotary order. Left hind leg, right hind leg, right front leg, and left front leg. When the legs tire, the giraffe will change to the opposite rotary order. Many animals make noises to communicate with one another. Giraffes, though, are generally thought of as silent.
The puzzling things about giraffes is they're more or less mute. They don't have the kind of vocal communication that you would expect.
Giraffes make very few sounds that are audible to the human ear, making only the occasional snorting or grunting noise. But scientists suspect they're communicating in a way we can't hear.
And the obvious candidate is infrasound, low-frequency communication that's below our range of hearing, but which perhaps the giraffes can detect.
Yeah.
John and Jacob have been recording infrasound around giraffes in the reserve with special microphones. To see if the giraffes react to the recordings, they'll need to play them back on this large speaker.
That's it. That's all we need.
It's already here.
John's had it flown in, especially to test infrasound on the giraffes and to gauge their reactions.
Turn left and then swing round to the right.
No one has done this work before with giraffes in the wild.
Stop, stop, stop.
There's a huge field of excellent research on infrasonic communication in elephants. There's been much more limited research in giraffes, but scientists have persuaded themselves that giraffes generate infrasound.
The one closest to us is flat cap.
Yeah.
And the other one is bookends.
Is it?
Yeah.
John is playing back the infrasound recordings made here in Samburu.
So Jacob, this is the second one from April the 20th.
Yes.
11, 12 and 12 seconds.
No one has any idea of what might happen next.
And here we go. Started. Now it's vibrating. I'm turning this volume up to maximum. Flat cap is definitely kind of looking around more than he was. He's not as settled as he was.
No.
Still figure. I'm going back to feeding. So that was interesting because flat cap maybe reacted to it.
It's the very beginning of these experiments in the field using the latest in infrasound recording and playback technology. It's an exciting moment.
If we can prove infrasonic communication in giraffes, then it will open up a whole field of research. We're exploring that as a possibility, not because we think it definitely is the case, but because we're intrigued.
The heavy rains finally come to Samburu after the long dry season. Browsing stops, and the giraffes vainly try to take cover under the acacia trees as they chew their cud, waiting for the storm to pass. The river fills up within hours. For the local hippos, it's a happy time. It means a healthier season for most animals, even predators like the lions, since their prey will be fattening up on the new greenery. Once the rain stops, these two females gather their 4 cubs and head out for an evening hunt. This leopard has already seen success today. She drags her prize up under a tree for dinner. The reserve doesn't have a fence around it, which means the animals can come and go as they please. John and Jacob suspect that the giraffes are leaving the park at night. They talk to off-duty reserve rangers about what's happening to the giraffes when they leave.
You know how the giraffes move in and out of the park?
Yeah.
And then in the morning they come back inside.
Yeah.
We're kind of worried, you know, that with the new road, when they're moving from the park outside and coming back in, that they're crossing that. You know, there was one killed recently on the road.
About 3 weeks ago, we were called out in the morning because a giraffe had been hit by a vehicle in the dark, in the early hours of the morning. And, you know, we were sad about it. It was a giraffe that was moving back into the reserve, having spent the night outside it, and was hit by somebody who survived, but whose vehicle was trashed. And that's the kind of thing that, you know, we would like to help mitigate.
I don't know whether you've seen them doing that recently.
The ones I've seen we just saw near those hills there.
Yes. I think we're going to proceed to the road, and we'll wait there until it gets dark and see what happens.
They head out with Ranger Mike Lucille.
Yeah,
Can we stop here? Just for a minute? Stop.
There's one female just coming.
It's like she's pausing to look left and right before she... So, Mike, this clear line, is that the boundary?
Yeah, it is the boundary now. On your left is the reserve. The right is the community land.
So this giraffe now is in unprotected area.
Yeah.
In order to have a chance of saving the giraffes from being killed on the new road, John and Jacob will need to be able to see what the giraffes are doing in the dark. That means deploying technology that can show them what's moving in the night. These are images from a thermal camera that records the heat signature of all warm-blooded animals.
They're really very close to the sleeping people.
For the first time, John, Jacob, and Mike are able to demonstrate that the giraffes are spending the night near the local village. Since there is no electricity in town, the darkness has kept the giraffes invisible in the night, until now.
The ability to see in the dark will open another half of the day, will become available to us.
The next morning, the men reflect on their observations.
The lions cannot come near the community at night. They do not come there. So the giraffes knows that they are very safe when they go near the community at night.
Daytime, reserve is more peace for them. So at night, because of the lions, they can hunt them. They go back again to the community. So it's just like...
So they're safe?
Yes, safe.
And I suppose at night also, the community is quiet. People are sleeping.
Yes,
so they're not disturbing them.
People also pose a threat to giraffes. They sometimes kill the animals for food. And there is the problem of habitat encroachment. Westgate is a community conservancy where the people choose to protect wildlife. Jacob was born here.
I'm a Samburu. My community is a Samburu. We are pastoralists. We stay looking after animals, which is we are still moving place to place for pasture, especially during the dry seasons. So we are still nomadic people.
We're working with several different ethnic groups. There are the Samburu, of course, immediately local to us.
How's the giraffes now? Are they giving birth now?
They're giving birth. Many watoto. Watoto wengi sana.
Jacob is very respected within his community, and that's enormously helpful. And I feel incredibly privileged to have a colleague of his caliber.
We just want to see your ear.
You want to see my ears? Shall I do it again?
John and Jacob encourage the elders to continue conserving the area's wildlife and alert them to the serious decline in the reticulated giraffe population. They agree with the elders that protecting the animals and encouraging wildlife tourism can bring much-needed financial and other benefits to the community.
During our lifetimes, we elders, during our lifetime, the numbers of giraffes have gone down and down and down. Just 15 years ago, there were more than 36,000 in the northeast of Kenya. And now there are fewer than 7,000. We need to protect the ones that are still left. So if we can leave them in peace here as much as possible, those numbers will rise. Each of us has our own role, but together we are stronger. And we can protect all the wildlife, from the smallest bird to the biggest giraffe.
We welcome you and be together with you, all of us.
Thank you, everybody.
There's another strategy John and Jacob have adopted to help get the village to identify more intimately with the giraffes. They've come to show the community's chairman photographs of the giraffe named after him.
So the name of this giraffe is Leletor. The nickname is Malcolm X.
Malcolm X.
Because there is an X here. Look. Can you see that X? And if you want a giraffe with your name, we can name one for you. We decided that we would name all of the giraffes after individual local people. And we are looking for names. We don't have enough names. It does seem to be something that people appreciate. Once somebody came to me and very shyly asked if there was any chance of having two, one to be named after his father, one to be named after his grandfather. I'd be honored if somebody named a wild animal after me.
John and Jacob have worked hard to put down roots for their reticulated giraffe project in communities like Westgate. And progress is being made. Respect for the other runs deep on both sides.
You know, it's a kind of a partnership because those people know more about giraffes than I'll ever know. They've lived with giraffes since they were toddlers.
At the end of another day of studying giraffes in the reserve, John and Jacob make a Skype call to update their friend and supporter, Anne Innes-Dagg, in Canada.
Anne.
Hi, John. How are you?
Let me show you who else is here.
How are you, Anne?
Oh,
Nice to see you again, long time.
And Le Soipa and Le Massian.
nice to see you. I love the decorations around your neck. They're beautiful. They look great.
Anne has spent time with John and his team in Samburu, and she encourages them in their research.
She's been very generous to us. You know, we sometimes talk about our project vehicle as the Dagmobile because she made a big contribution to the cost of that. So this is the first time we've ever done something like this.
Have you found any giraffe yet?
Yes, we're watching a group right now. So we're just negotiating some acacia trees here, holding on to the laptop for dear life. I'm going to turn the screen around while we're moving in the hope that you can see some of the landscape. You'll see them in a minute, I hope.
Oh, yes, I can see them moving. And the little one beside it. Oh, that's super.
It's the middle of the rainy season, and the park is absolutely fantastic.
And it's so beautiful to see Samburu.
Yes. You need to come back, Anne.
I do. I wish I were there right now. Oh, but look at the giraffe. Is that Safari?
Yes.
Oh, she's so much bigger. The last time I saw her, she was only about, what, 8 feet?
Yeah, yeah.
So you've got, what, 13 now?
Anne is lucky enough to live near the giraffes at African Lion Safari, which is less than an hour from her home in Ontario.
Hi. Hi.
She has special permission to touch the animals here, something she would never do in the wild.
Giraffes are so wonderful. It makes me even tear up. they're so beautiful, and I love them so much. I touch noses.
That enthusiasm for the animals is something she's inspired in young zookeeper Jason Poodlal.
Andag is the mother of all giraffe lovers. So for me, it's just, a no-brainer that Andag would be my hero.
Jason and his colleague veterinarian Peter Rich have access to technology that Anne Innes-Dag could only dream of in the 1950s. Here they use thermal camera technology to see how giraffes regulate their body temperature.
Okay, so all the mature females are starting to cool. Kibali, who's still nursing her calf, is much warmer. Like, she's really warm. Even that tongue that's dangling down. Like, she's so warm, you can barely see her spot pattern, whereas all the rest are very distinct. Look how cool the baby's legs are.
Yeah.
So the babies are definitely, they lose their heat a lot faster.
Yeah.
She is cooling down, though.
Yeah.
It's just taking, look at that, look.
No, here we go.
She's cooling down really fast. That's her calf standing right beside her.
Right.
So is her calf
Warming up.
as she's going down. 34.8. Look.
35.1.
The calf raised in temperature. So maybe the moms are a hot water bottle for their babies overnight.
Giraffe mothers pass heat to their young, something they might do in the wild on a cold, rainy night in Samburu. This is one of many observations that researchers will make in the future using technology like thermal cameras.
Okay, and then she's warm right there.
Look at that. Look at that. That is really fascinating.
Jason's passion has led him to start an artificial insemination program for these Rothschild's giraffes, a highly endangered subspecies of the animal.
Good girl, good girl. Okay, door please. All right, we'll give her a quick ultrasound. Baby's probably pretty big now. We're tracking the pregnancy of an artificially inseminated giraffe. It allows us to track the growth of it from just a tiny little embryo to a fetus up until the point it's born.
So she's 111 days?
She's 111. That allows us to make sure that these artificially inseminated giraffes are just as healthy and just as viable as a naturally bred counterpart. There we are. The smallest giraffe in the world. There's its little snout. The head's here.
Scientists disagree over whether artificial insemination programs like this should be used to increase the number of giraffes in the wild, since breeding is not the usual problem. But Jason and his colleagues are optimistic.
The potential for using this towards restoring wild populations would be to have animals inseminated at that critical age where we can send them back into a semi-wild state, could be mixed with perhaps wild counterparts, and reintroduced back into the wild to learn the rest of the skills that they would need to be wild giraffe.
Wild giraffes are highly successful breeders when the conditions are right. But before any mating occurs, the males take part in a process to discover whether the females are ready for them.
What he's doing is nudging her with his nose in order to assess the reproductive condition of the female. The female donates the sample, urinates, and the male, the bull, effectively drinks a little bit of that stream of urine, but then raising his head and curling his upper lip right back in this extraordinary, unmistakable gesture. And then the bull plays that sample over the cells of his olfactory organ, which are capable of a very high-resolution chemical assay, effectively, of the contents of that sample. And from that, he derives very detailed information about her reproductive status.
Hey, kids. What are you looking at, Safari? What are you looking at?
Safari is not just any giraffe. She's the first giraffe born through artificial insemination, the payoff to Jason's program.
Holy smokes, and you're getting so tall.
Now, they eagerly await the birth of the calf on the ultrasound, the first conceived from frozen sperm. This is Lake Elementaita, one of the saltwater lakes in Kenya's Great Rift Valley. The adjoining Soisambu Conservancy is home not just to flamingos and pelicans, but also to the rare and endangered Rothschild's giraffe. Paler than reticulated giraffes, and known for their distinctive white legs, there are about 1,000 Rothschilds left in the wild. This is the subspecies that Jason Poutalal and his team at African Lion Safari are trying to save. Dr. Zoe Muller, an English wildlife biologist, is Jason's friend and colleague. She's been studying the Rothschild's giraffes here at Soisambu for years.
When I first realized how endangered giraffes were becoming in the wild, I just couldn't believe it. And because no one was doing anything, I decided that someone had to do it, and well, that person might as well be me. And I think that really was the start of a lifelong commitment to giraffe conservation.
Zoe conducts her studies in the Conservancy, which is both a privately owned working farm and a protected area for animals like giraffes. Zoe and her colleague Amos Chege, a naturalist in Soisambu, are making discoveries about giraffe behavior that will help them in their conservation efforts.
Oh, the giraffes, yeah?
Oh. All of the science on giraffe behavior said that giraffes are pretty asocial, they don't have any long-term bonds, and that all the herds that you see are just random collections of individuals. And that absolutely wasn't what I was seeing in the field. So I sort of started to question, well, hang on a minute, maybe there's something more going on here than we really realized. And the more I did research, the more I realized that there's all sorts of things about their sociality that we just don't really understand yet.
So where's the pregnant one? I think she's gone to give birth.
The pregnant
somewhere.
one went to this direction and the other side.
Let's go there next, because I think she's gone, she's taken herself away.
Yeah.
One of the most striking social behaviors that Zoe has observed among giraffes is the powerful bond between females and their offspring.
Yeah, this is the area where they would always give birth.
Yep.
Stop there.
Whenever Zoe is tracking a pregnant female, she always heads to the same area where the giraffes isolate themselves to give birth, a place known as the maternity ward.
Wow, she's very heavily pregnant. Yeah, I think she's going to give birth the next few days. It's exciting.
Oh, that's much good news.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can see with the neck pattern, that's definitely her. And then when you confirm it...
Zoe identifies the pregnant female as number 15, or Barbara, who was raised in Nairobi's Giraffe Center. If Barbara has been released from a captive breeding facility and become pregnant in the wild, could it be a sign that Jason Poutalal's insemination program will work here? By the next morning, there's a lovely surprise in store for Zoe and Amos. A baby has been born overnight.
Most research on giraffe has suggested that giraffes are bad mothers and that they don't really bond with their calves. I think the reason for that conclusion was probably because giraffes engage in what's known as hiding behavior. So when they have a very new calf, they will hide it near to a bush so that the mother can go off and forage. And I think researchers previously may have seen that as abandonment. However, we're starting to realise that there's some very close bonds between the females and their offspring, but also between females and other adult females' offsprings. You often see allosuckling, which means that an adult female will feed not only her offspring, but the offspring of another female, which to me, I don't think would exist unless there were strong social bonds in place.
In the course of studying the mothers and their young in Soisambu, Zoe had the chance to observe something that changed the way she understood giraffes.
One day I was out in the field doing my research as normal, and I got a call on the radio to say that a young giraffe had been found dead. And so I rushed over there to see what was happening, and I noticed that the mother stood literally almost over the body of her calf, and the whole time that I observed her, she didn't drink, she didn't eat, she just stood there.
What Zoe observed is grieving behavior, something no one had considered giraffes capable of expressing. More proof of the animal's sophisticated social bonds.
But with this dead baby, I decided to just watch them for 5 or 6 days to see what happened. And the mother stayed with the carcass for 5 days. And she was never eating, she was just vigilant or standing there the whole time. So it was obviously she chose to remain with her calf, even though it was a great cost to herself. It was really fascinating.
They have got such a big bond between the mother and the child.
Exactly. That told me that there was more to giraffe social bonding than we thought.
Yeah, sure, there must be.
Zoe's research has demonstrated the complexity of social bonds between mothers and their young.
Yeah, this is the area that they used to crash their babies just in there from 2 tanks.
Yeah.
Giraffe mothers creche their young, so that means that one adult female will be left in charge of a group of young juveniles. That means that the other mothers can go off and forage and meet their nutritional requirements, knowing that their babies are safe. We've observed recently this group of female giraffe where there was a creche situation going on. There were 3 juvenile giraffes, and one of the females seemed to be in charge of them. And as we were watching, another female giraffe came in quite quickly from a different direction. And as she arrived at the group of babies, the original female, the original babysitter, left, and she went off in a different direction. So it was almost as if the new female was like, okay, I'm here now, it's my shift, you've got some time off.
Like John Doherty, Zoe suspects that infrasound could be the channel through which the females share information with each other and their calves. While Zoe was making her observations about how the females mysteriously share their care of the babies, infrasound recordings were made for John Doherty's study. The recordings, which you can see represented below, are of sounds below the range of human hearing. You can see that there is an infrasonic event that occurs just before the baby on the left turns its head. There, has it heard something from one of the females? And here, after one female has left a second in charge of the babies, another infrasonic event occurs here, slightly before this female turns to look in the direction of the female that has just exited the area. These are the first infrasound recordings made in the wild and married to footage of giraffe behavior. There are hints in the recordings that point to infrasonic communication, but John Doherty will need much more evidence to be sure. Use of technologies like infrasonic recording and thermal imaging gives researchers a chance to uncover further secrets about giraffe behavior. And like John and Jacob, Zoe is unsure of what her giraffes are getting up to at night.
We just don't know what giraffes do at night. Are they foraging and taking on energy? Are they resting? We just don't know.
That's really amazing. I can't see them with my eye now at all, and yet here they all are.
Zoe takes a thermal imaging camera out to continue observing the three mothers and their babies overnight, something she's never done before.
It'll be fascinating to watch this group throughout the night and see how they change, because it's quite costly for these giraffes to be standing vigilant all night long.
The babies were put in the middle, and the babies sat down and they slept. When giraffe go to sleep, they have to put their head on their rump, and that's how they get their REM sleep or their deep sleep. It's very, very rare to see that in the wild.
And babies have completely disappeared now, which means they've hidden them well.
The three females are intensely alert to a serious threat nearby. It's a group of 6 hyenas on the prowl, looking for prey like a baby giraffe. The females nudge and even kick their babies awake, forcing them into a tighter circle where they can protect them.
The female adults are very vigilant, and they've made a circle around their young. This classic protection from predators, this grouping behavior, they go very dense.
The hyenas leave the area in the direction of some impalas. For tonight, the babies are safe. It's been a long night of watching giraffes with the thermal imaging technology. Zoe's observations are more than just information about giraffe behavior. There's a lot more at stake than just furthering our knowledge of the animals.
With more research and more long-term studies, the more insight we get into their social behavior, which obviously has huge implications for conservation and management of these species. So it's really important that we know this stuff.
The greatest threat to giraffes comes from humans, mostly through poaching for their meat or encroachment on their habitat. In Soisambu, some giraffes have been tragically electrocuted by overhead power lines, animals Zoe knew well.
Yeah, a few years ago one was hit, and I came down quite quickly so that I could try and identify who it was, to make a note of who's left the population. And his body was so charred, there was just no coat pattern left, and it just showed the power of the electricity. It would have been instant. And it's a shame, because he was a real big mature male, obviously been around for a long time, and it's all over just like that for him.
Zoe and her colleagues in the Conservancy are working together to make sure the power company builds and maintains their lines so that giraffes are safe.
Please call the operations desk if you see an animal that's in distress.
To me, it's absolutely unbelievable how giraffes can be so endangered in the wild and nobody knows.
No one has been worried at all about them, and yet the numbers are really horrifying.
Unless urgent conservation action is taken, we are going to get to a situation where they may not be there anymore.
For researchers racing to understand giraffes before they disappear, there is a realization of how unique the animals are in the planet's web of life.
Giraffes are absolutely incredible creatures. They're about as likely as a unicorn.
If you went to another planet and you tried to describe a giraffe, it would just sound like the most absurd creature you could ever imagine. But they're there, they're beautiful, they're at the end of their evolutionary tree. So if we lose giraffes, we've lost that whole branch of biodiversity.